This is Suk Singh. I'm a faculty member at University of California, San Diego, and we're going to be covering today thoracic ultrasound. This is part of our intern lecture series, but whoever kind of stumbles upon this website, feel free to listen. It's about 10 minutes, and we're going to be covering the principles of thoracic ultrasound. Real quickly, I want to kind of go over the objectives of today. We're going to cover the anatomy, then discuss some technical considerations, and finally the clinical context of how you would use thoracic ultrasound. Anatomy. So first things first, it's the rib cages that you have to deal with. You can see them very easily on the ultrasound. Below the rib cages are the lungs, and that's our point of interest. We're going to go ahead and just draw in our diaphragm right here. And then we're all familiar with the fact that as the diaphragm moves, the lungs move up and down. And that's going to be relevant as we discuss how to use bedside ultrasound. Also, I'm going to draw in the bowels here as well, simply because they do come into play when you're using lung ultrasound. So lung ultrasound, there's really four positions. Position one, and you kind of slide down. Position 2, and you slide down. Position 3, which is kind of the right upper quadrant view, analogous to your fast view, and then position 4, the contralateral side, a left upper quadrant view. And the reason why the bowels come into play, or the abdominal content, is that on these kind of right upper and left upper quadrant views, you're going to be using the liver and spleen respectively as your acoustic window to try to look above the diaphragm there. So some technical considerations. What does lung actually look like on ultrasound? It's kind of a bogart from Harry Potter, meaning that nobody really knows what it looks like. If you understand that joke, any case, nobody really knows what lung ultrasound looks like, and it's because of if you go back to your physics, the beams kind of come in, hit the air, and scatter. So to get an image on your screen, the beam has to hit something and reflect back. So if it's kind of hitting air and not coming back, well, then you basically have artifact. And that's what lung ultrasound is all about. It's looking at artifacts. So in the 1980s, it was thought that it was mission impossible, that you just can't see lung on ultrasound. And you're correct, you really can't see lung on ultrasound. But if you know the artifacts, then the addition of artifacts or the subtraction of artifacts, or a change in the artifacts might potentiate some pathology there. So kind of like this is what happened from the 1980s, is that we just kind of changed our perspective. You only saw one thing, and then all of a sudden, if you look at it differently, you kind of realize it's something else. Kind of like this dress, which is clearly white and gold. It's also Yanny, by the way. So in any case, so common ultrasound artifacts. A-lines are normal things you would see on ultrasound. Lung sliding is a normal thing on ultrasound. You kind of get these ring down artifacts with lung sliding, which I'll go over. And mirroring are normal things you see with ultrasound. So the lack of these, or the addition of something else, might indicate that there might be some pathology going on. So some technical considerations, we're going to go over the probe selections, so you can get your linear probe. We really use these to look for pneumothorax, and then you have your your lower frequency, higher wavelength probes that will look deeper, the curvilinear and the phased array. And clinically, you're looking for pulmonary edema, effusions, or consolidations when you're jumping to the deeper probes. So let's go back to this screen here, and let's go back to kind of our first image. I'm going to shrink down for a second. So in this first image here, what we're going to do is we're going to put our probe, let's see here. We're going to put it right here in that, that first spot. The probe indicator is towards the head there. So maybe I'll do something like this, and you can kind of slide down. So let's go ahead and do that. So here's your probe, and the first thing we're looking at here is we're looking at with a linear probe. So very superficial. You can see we're only 4 centimeters deep, right? And you have a rib here, a rib here. Your probe indicator's towards the head, so the head is here, the feet are here, and you kind of just slide down with this probe. And you see these things here, those are ring down artifacts. I won't go into them in detail why you get them here. That's normal. You really see that frequently with linear probes. As you switch over to the abdominal probe, right, there's a slide down, and as you switch over to the abdominal probe, things are just look a little bit different, but they're very similar. You still have that lung sliding, That's your visceral and parietal pleura sliding back and forth. Here, you kind of have a bigger window, so you can see a rib space here, a rib here with a rib space here, another rib here with a shadow, another rib here. Also kind of coming into view are these A lines. You can see this A line here, which is also normal. And then here's basically another normal view, just kind of settings are a little bit different. We're not as high as gain. We're also still in a curvilinear probe. We're looking very deep, 15 centimeters. You can kind of make out the lung sliding, and this is why I say, for pneumothorax, you want to use a linear probe, because you can see the lung sliding a lot better here than you can here. But believe me, the lung sliding is still there. And I chose this because you can see the A lines a little better. Here's the A line here, here's the A line here, and these are kind of equally spaced out from the pleural space. So pleural space, A line. This is all normal. Lung sliding, A lines. This is all normal stuff. Here you can tell we're on the kind of, it's mislabeled as right, but really probably on the left side because you can see a little bit of the heart there as well. Here's an abnormal view. So same thing, looking deep. You can see ribs with a shadow here, ribs with a shadow here. You can see a little bit of sliding going on each side, but you see a lack of A lines. See, those A lines are disappeared, and instead you're replaced with these B lines, which is pathological, and this is suggestive of interstitial alveolar syndrome, which can be from a variety of things, and we'll talk a bit more about that in a little bit. So here's another, lack of a normal artifact, and this is linear probe, very superficial. You can see a rib here, a rib here. You can see the sliding here with a little bit of maybe ring down, but look here, there's no sliding there. And so this actually, there's a wide differential for when you have lack of sliding, because now you lost that artifact. But in this case, when you can see a sliding and then suddenly a jump to a lack of sliding, that tells you that this actually is probably a pneumothorax, meaning that the visceral and parietal pleura are not pushed up against each other. There's air separating them. And because there's air, you really don't see anything. And because there is no air in between the visceral and parietal pleura here, and you see the sliding, that's normal lung. I'm going to quickly mention M mode here because people do talk about M mode. And M mode is basically a line that will show up that tells you motion along that line. So you hit M mode on your screen and it basically comes down here and it plots time and motion along. So there's no movement here and there's a bunch of movement here, and this kind of difference in interface where there's what we call barcode here, and then what we call is a sandy beach sign, so you can see the sand and here's the beach. That means that there's basically a change in interface from here and here, and that's normal lung. Versus if you have all barcode, so here's a new M mode. Imagine if we're doing the M mode through here, and there's no change in interface, nothing is really moving. You have all barcode. That's suggestive of a pneumothorax as well, or lack of sliding. The next view we commonly are going to do is we're going to do the right upper quadrant view, and here's what it normally looks like. So you can see the liver here, so there's your liver using your acoustic window. You have a kidney here, which is retroperitoneal and really not shown here, and this bright line right there, that's your diaphragm. Okay, and down here, because we're shooting from here down, so we're shooting from the right side going to the left side, so we're shooting from the right side going left side, going deeper. That's the spine there. And so this is normal because you can see the spine going, that's your thoracic spine, and suddenly the spine just kind of ends. Let me pause the video for a second. So the spine just kind of ends, right? And you know that the patient still has the thoracic and cervical spine, and the reason why it ends is because above the diaphragm, there's all lung. And remember, lung is all artifacts, so you can't really see lung. So because there's nothing for the beams to penetrate through, everything reflects off the diaphragm, comes back, and it basically causes a mirroring effect of the liver. So it looks like a liver, looks like this on this side. And the fact that you don't see the spine anymore tells you that there's no way for the beams to conduct through, and this is all artifact, which is normal. Now, if you had something like a pleural effusion, right, so look at this one right here. Same idea. There's your liver. There's your kidney. Let's go back to that. There's your kidney. There's your liver. And look at the spine now. See how the spine stops at the diaphragm? And look how the spine just keeps going. And you have a pleural effusion here, and here's some consolidated lung, right? And so what's happening is now the beams have something to shoot through. They can shoot through the lung because it's not filled with air, and they can shoot through the pleural effusions, and it shows you there's more spine. And up here, there's some more lung. Okay, this is probably pneumonia, pleural effusion, some atelectatic lung there. That's all abnormal. And the normal person just basically has mirroring of the liver there. So really simple. So that's really it for the the most of the thoracic ultrasound. There's what we look for is a pneumothorax, which I already showed you, is this kind of lack of lung sliding with a lung point, which is the transition of sliding to no sliding. What does a pneumonia look like? Well, it'll look something like this, where you have, let's go back for a second, right? And so let's just play that. So you see little B lines, a consolidation here, right? You don't have that mirroring, right? You don't have those A lines. You just have a bunch of stuff that normally you don't see. And the pneumonias can be very variable. You may just have B lines on one side. Interstitial alveolar syndrome. Oh, go to PE real fast. So PE, basically you have normal lungs, right? Because nothing wrong with the lung parenchyma. So you have A lines, and you have normal lung. Interstitial alveolar syndrome is basically those B lines, and this reflects anything when there's a damage between the visceral and parietal pleura, and there's kind of this inflammatory response. You get this. So most commonly we see it with pulmonary edema, and in our population, but a pulmonary contusion will look something very similar. It'll be unilateral from wherever they have the contusion. Even a pneumonia can kind of give this to you too, if the pneumonia is kind of damaging that interstitial space. And then finally, effusions, which we've covered already. Our effusions are here. So there's an effusion showing the spine. And as this person takes a deep breath, a current in the lung just kind of pushes everything down. And that's why you can't see anything above that. But on expiration, you can see the effusion. And now they take a deep breath. The lung kind of comes, pushes everything down, and you have no signal. And that's basically it for lung ultrasound. Real simple, just up here, right upper quadrant, left side. Remember, when you're up here, you're sliding down, and then the left upper quadrant. And that's it for lung ultrasound. Thank you guys so very much.